the home of the common Joe and the common Sally in the know, even more so than all those media talking heads.
How's it going out there today, boys and girls in sporting land? This is the OCF. That's the Outlaw of College Football, also known as JPC. Today I got a special treat for y'all. Brought me a little guest in here, my podcast partner for life, Johnathan Lewis. I brought him in here today because, I've had a fascination somewhat with the new hire, Brent Venables. There's just the energy of this guy and no wasted motion. And I was just curious as to how his recruiting's going. I'm not a real big recruiting buff like Johnathan, so I'm bringing Johnathan in here today to give me a little backdrop and maybe some information on the recruiting class and how it's coming in his first year. And so I'm going to throw it over to Johnathan. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Johnathan.
All right, so college football, Johnathan Lewis on YouTube. Everything college football, kind of like the Outlaw College Football here. Me and him has been creating content together since, 2016, 17. So, yeah, been around for a little bit. But either way, guys, I love recruiting. It's what probably my natural passion is when it comes down to talking college football outside of the normal preview predictions and stuff like that. But either way, yes, this is, believe it or not, one of my favorite times of the year. People usually hate recruiting or they don't like talking about it. I love it. I love watching film on it and stuff like that. But yeah. See, this is where me and him differ a lot, is on the recruiting side. He doesn't really follow it. You may follow. I know you follow it. You just don't pay as much.
I do follow it, but I'm not as in depth with it as you are. But I'm real curious about Oklahoma this year. Like I said, I've been fascinated by this hire. The guy comes in and it's just nonstop motion with his energy and just. So I'm curious to how his recruiting's going. Is his recruiting as energetic as his press conferences have been?
So look, I can make a 20-minute video on this, guys. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down to how I think Brent Venables is doing at Oklahoma as a whole, the recruiting class, and then the transfer portal class as well, because the transfer portal is pretty much just as important in your first year as a recruiting class, as we've seen with, Mel up there in Michigan State, right? So, you can turn around a program in one season with the transfer portal class, or you can demolish a program, bringing in the wrong people. And what it comes down to, guys, is, the energy Brent Venables is bringing in to the Oklahoma program is not just on the field. It's the recruiting trail. But it's also the people he brought in behind him, right? I'm pretty sure you knew about Jay Valai when he came to Alabama, maybe not JPC, but him coming in as the defensive backs coach. Brent Venables bringing him over from Alabama into Oklahoma had a lot to do with the Texas connection, in my opinion. The guy spent a lot of time in Texas, high school football, recruiting at Alabama, even before Alabama. And he just has these connections that he needs, right? And it's going to help out Brent Venables in this recruiting classes through the years, as long as Jay Valai is there in the state of Texas. Because the biggest knock on Brent Venables when he got to Oklahoma was, will he be able to recruit the state of Texas? We all heard Colin Cowherd, what he said. You know what I mean? So, Texas is pretty much landlocked now with Jimbo Fisher and Steve Sarkisian. There's no way Oklahoma's going to be able to get in there and recruit these guys. But it's funny because some of the biggest guys that have come up in this 2023 class so far have been, Texas recruits, along with transfer portal guys as well. So we're here to talk about that. So let me start off by saying that. Second of all, let me run through a couple of these recruits and tell you what you're bringing in. The biggest recruit, in my opinion, of this entire class is going to be the obvious 4-star quarterback, Jackson Arnold. I can sit here and talk about this guy probably for an hour alone. Multi-level thrower, anticipatory thrower, plays 6A football, which I love seeing. If you're a high-level talent, you want to see them playing high-level competition. That's the big knock on Arch Manning. He's playing 2A football right now. He's not playing high-level competition, so maybe you don't know what you're getting out of him if you're a Texas or Georgia fan, right? But you know what you're getting in Jackson Arnold here. Throws an interception for every 89 attempts, protects the football. A lot like, in my opinion, possibly a better version of Dylan Gabriel, who you brought in from the transfer portal, right? And I'm going to get into another guy here in a minute. But either way, from Denton, Texas. Once again, Brent Venables gets down into Texas, brings in a high-level recruit like Jackson Arnold. A lot of people thought he couldn't bring in. So that's the first one here. And the next couple I'm just going to run through really quick here. 3-star lineman Joshua Bates. He's more of a development in the waiting. Basically a big interior lineman, right? He's going to most likely play the guard position earlier than later, moving into tackle possibly. I don't see it personally because of his wingspan, his hand size, and stuff like that. Hip movement, probably going to see him stay around guard center position, most likely guard. Then you bring in 3-star safety Caleb Spencer, who I thought was a humongous pickup. Why? Because Caleb Spencer isn't just a good safety. He basically plays the good star position if you're an Alabama player, or if you're a Brent Venables guy, cheetah position that he ran at Clemson. The all-around guy. He can play safety. He can play corner if you need to against a spread offense. He can come down as a linebacker. He can put his hands on the ground and come off the edge and blitz. And this guy literally did that exact same thing in high school. Caleb Spencer. I think it was just a great fit to bring him in. Don't look at the star position. Don't look at the ratings, the composite ratings. Look at what he does really well and how he fits the system that, these guys are going to be running. Because when it comes down to it, I can talk about Jay Valai. I can talk about the defense coordinator, Ted. I can talk about all these guys. But we know it's going to be just like Nick Saban at Alabama. It's going to be up to Brent Venables to have the defense on the correct track. So with that being said, 3-star running back Eric McCarty, I feel like long-term guy, development guy. You're going to probably see a lot more transfer portal movement when it comes to the running back position in the next probably 2 seasons, in my opinion, just because it seems to be an easier grab to find a good running back in a mid-tier program like Alabama did with Georgia Tech, and other programs as well. Travis Dye, coming into USC from Oregon. Not that Oregon's a mid-tier, but, maybe he wants to play somewhere else now, or his initial destination, but it was too crowded, and now it's not. Now there's a different coaching staff. Now there's different players, different system. Maybe they want to play for Jeff Lebby, a vert and shoot program, something like that. But that's pretty much all I got for the recruiting. Roll into the transfer portal, right? So the transfer portal, Dylan Gabriel coming over from UCF, great grab, fits the system perfect in my opinion. Couldn't find a better quarterback for what you had on staff already, because if it would have been left up to what was left at Oklahoma, you would have been in some trouble, and I think we saw that during the spring game. All right, the next one's going to be LV Bunkley Shelton out of Arizona State, the wide receiver. Big guy to go opposite of Marvin Sims, in my opinion, which is the best receiver on Oklahoma. And that's just my opinion. I felt like Marvin Mims has been very underutilized, even under Lincoln Riley throughout the years. And you could have used him a lot better, but you didn't. Every year I kept bringing up Marvin Mims, saying, when is it going to be his breakout time? And it just never happened. I feel like this year under BV, right? Under Jeff Lebby, I think they're going to definitely utilize this guy and maximize his potential, referring to Marvin Mims. But then you bring in, like I said, LV. It's just going to maximize both of these guys on what they can do. Then, of course, the last guy I'm just going to talk about, because I can go through all this list, but it'll take me 3 hours. It's going to be Dave Bevel, the Pitt QB. Hopefully I said his name right. You're just adding depth to the QB room at this point. He's not going to come in. He's not going to take over for Dylan Gabriel or nothing like that. So, yeah, that's the big things when it comes to recruiting for Oklahoma. Brent Venables has pretty much, I would say, exceeded expectations so far when it comes to recruiting. I personally didn't see him coming in snagging Jackson Arnold, but Jay Valai is going to bring in a lot of defensive recruits with him, along with Brent Venables, and Jeff Lebby is going to take care of the offensive side, who brought over Dylan Gabriel himself, because he was already personally attached to the guy anyways. So, yeah, hopefully I didn't run you into the ground and make you fall asleep. So,
no. Like I said, I just wanted to get a good rundown of what he's been doing. So as far as the class goes, where is that ranking right now, like on Rivals
39.
and stuff?
24/7 has them 39th overall. Obviously, they lost the big-time receiver Ashton Kozart to Oregon. He had them around, I believe it was 28th at the time, 29th as far as national ranking. When they lost him, it fell completely. And it's because of the lack of big-time recruits.
One player caused them to slip 11 spots.
Well, the reason is because you look at the commitment. So if I go in and look, I believe they only have 3 or 4. They have like 4 commitments right now. You lose basically 20% of your class. It's going to bring down your percentage quite a bit. It's going to bring in your rankings quite a bit. But that's because not a lot of big-time recruits are committing right now. NIL is changing all this. They're waiting longer for the NIL cycle to get through so they can sign these bigger NIL contracts and commit at a later date. So
it's also, it comes with the territory with a first-year coach. As you know, Nick Saban, when he first came into Alabama, his class, I don't even know if it made the top 10 in his first year. I think it was maybe 16th or something.
Yeah, so, it wasn't great.
I mean, on Nick Saban's standards, it wasn't great, but and he's not only is he a first-year coach at Oklahoma, he's a first ever coach anywhere. So you got to give him a little leeway for that, I reckon. But you mentioned Jeff Lebby and Todd Bates as defensive coordinator and offensive coordinators. Both of those guys have pedigrees that should help this guy down the road. You know, Jeff Lebby was tutored by Lane Kiffin.
Yep.
And Todd Bates was tutored by Brent Venables himself and was on the staff with Dabo Swinney. So he's bringing in the right pieces, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, no, Todd Bates is going to be the defensive line coach. The defensive coordinator is going to be I can never remember I always want to call him Ted Story. It's Ted Roof is his name.
Okay. They have him listed co-defensive coordinator.
Yeah, he is co-defense coordinator, Bates is, but he's going to be the defensive line coach. And that's important. I think that's the most underappreciated hire out of anybody this coming season. You know, you could talk about Lincoln Riley, you can talk about the head coaches, but when it comes to everybody else outside of that, Todd Bates was the guy that created the defensive line that was so vaunted at Clemson. You think back to the 2018 season when they had 3 or 4, I believe it was 3 defensive linemen drafted in the first round. That was recruited and developed by Todd Bates. Like that was the guy to do all of that. He's the one that's kept that defense, strong. If you go back to even last season when they had 3 losses, what was everybody saying? The offense wasn't the problem. The defense wasn't the problem. It was the offense. So right. Todd Bates had that defensive line doing what they needed to do. He never faulted. It was, you know what I mean? It was the offense. It was DJ, right? Everybody bringing those guys.
It was amazing. Guys. It was amazing last year at how far Clemson's offense fell to me.
Yeah.
But what was more amazing is that their defense probably won them about 9 or 10 of those games that they won.
Yes.
I mean, because they were on the ropes many times. I mean, they almost lost to a really bad Georgia Tech team. Ended like 14-8 or something.
Yes.
So that defense probably single-handedly kept Dabo from having a 4 to 5 loss season, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Another guy they brought in was Thad Turnipseed. He was director of football operations at the University of Alabama and Clemson. And in both cases, I mean, I'm not saying that he was the end all, but he had a lot to do with the success of both of those big-time programs. So you bring them over to Oklahoma, once again, one of those little small moves behind the scenes that could have a big impact down the road.
So, Thad, everybody wants to easily say, anybody can look up and say Thad Turnipseed came in to Alabama, came into Clemson, comes into Oklahoma. What's really interesting about Thad is his input on player development, but his recruiting. Everywhere he goes, you see a very similar pattern when it comes to the recruiting. For example, we'll say Jay Valai for Oklahoma, right? Jay Valai comes over from Oklahoma at a very parallel position. And a lot of people are wondering why. Well, a lot of it had to do with Jay Valai, number one, never sits anywhere longer than 2 to 3 years. We already know that. He spent 1 year at Alabama and they came over. And then Alabama picks up T. Tavarius Robinson, which was the ultimate end all for Alabama fans if you pay attention to recruiting. This was the guy you wanted to bring in the first place, was T-Rob. So you I feel like Alabama kind of knew T-Rob was going to come in if they lost somebody. And when that kind of cycled through, it kind of released Jay Valai because Thad pretty much kept up with, I'm pretty sure, Jay Valai and his connections to the recruiting world in Texas. And when you look at T-Rob for Alabama, it's not like you lost Jay Valai and you lose all your Texas recruiting connections, but what you did is you gained a lot of Southern Florida connections. So Thad has this reputation, in my opinion, of bringing in development on the back end that pays really close attention to recruiting and recruiting pipelines that goes and knocks on the doors of not just the players, but the coaches. The backdoor of IMG Academy at Alabama wasn't created by Nick Saban. That was created by Thad Turnipseed by bringing in the earlier guys in Kirby Smarts of the world that had connections to these high school coaches that went to IMG. That was the backdoor guys there. And everybody wants to give Nick Saban all the credit in the world for Alabama, but they don't give enough credit to the 118 assistants that he has on his staff. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's where Thad comes in and he kind of elevates that program to really get them to the next level. So,
yeah. So in the end, let's disregard rivals and 247 and all that. Yeah. In Johnathan Lewis's opinion, in the end, how has Brent Venables proceeded so far in his early part of his tenure here? I mean, is he doing all right, do you think?
Beyond expectation. Look, he's got Oklahoma fans excited more. And look, it's a slight to Lincoln Riley, but he's got the Oklahoma fans more excited than Lincoln Riley ever had them. Right. You look at Brent Venables, he didn't play at Oklahoma, but he coached underneath Bob Stoops, right? When they won the last national championship. He's that pedigree guy. He's the guy that was Oklahoma. He's seen a national championship. Oklahoma was underneath Bob Stoops, which obviously is a legendary coach, an icon there. And there's just more of a passover and more of an excitement. If you ask me, Oklahoma fans, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Bob Stoops hands the ball over to Brent Venables versus when he did it at Lincoln Riley, because when he handed it over to Lincoln Riley had no connection to the national championship. He has no direct connection, in my opinion, to Oklahoma. BV is the opposite. You're handing over your alma mater to it. Basically, I'm not going to say an alumnus because he didn't go to school there. He went to Kansas State and he coached underneath Bill Snyder and then underneath Dabo Swinney, underneath Bob Stoops, in between those two. And I feel like that's why there's so much more excitement, because not only is this guy already a proven defense coordinator, been coaching for 25 years, you know what I mean, as a coordinator, and knows his stuff, knows how to recruit, knows the X's and O's, but he also gives you that feeling of this is the Oklahoma guy. Like, can we relate, I guess, JPC, can we relate to Sam Pittman in Arkansas? When you look at Sam Pittman, you're like, that guy's an Arkansas coach. He's Arkansas for life, right? So that's what I think of when I think of Brent Venables. He's an Oklahoma guy. He's an Oklahoma coach. He's that guy that's going to stay there and not leave. That's just my opinion.
Well, you also made a good point off the air about Brent Venables has been associated with national championships everywhere he's been. He was associated with the one national championship that Bob Stoops won, whereas Lincoln Riley wasn't. So he does have a huge sort of connection to Oklahoma and Midwest in general, because he's from Kansas, if I'm not mistaken. But and then he won 2 national championships with Dabo Swinney.
Exactly.
So Lincoln Riley never attained that as an assistant or as a head coach. And of course, he's not been a head coach, how long was it, 5 years in Oklahoma?
Exactly.
So he's never been able to win the big prize, while Brent Venables has been associated with 3 national championships.
And that's where I feel like the Oklahoma fans got too excited when Lincoln Riley did take over, because the one question I was always asking is, well, what has he done, right? What has he built outside of Oklahoma? And it's hard to find anything. Like with Brent Venables, it's not hard at all. You go back to look at even the 2 national championships Clemson won. Most people want to say, look at Trevor Lawrence, right? Look at Deshaun Watson. Look at these guys. Bro, did you not see the defense? Did you not see the NFL talent that was on that team? You know what I mean? On the defensive side that was running around. Are you kidding me? It wasn't just on the star position or the skill position players on the offense. And I feel like that's what was most overlooked, because we're really going to find out now that Tony Elliott left and went to Virginia, right? And Brent Venables went to Oklahoma. What that team and what that core group was made of. We're really going to find out now. And, God help Dabo Swinney, because he lost everybody. He lost the offense coordinator, he lost the defense coordinator, he lost the defensive line coach. These were the guys that, help piece everything together. So we're going to see if he can pull a Nick Saban.
And I guess we'll see, but I was a little underwhelmed. And they're saying about Clemson, but I was a little underwhelmed in the replacements that Dabo went out and got. I think he stayed in-house.
Yep.
For the most part.
Well, Dabo, number one, speaks out against the transfer portal. Dabo doesn't like reaching too far out the lines. He likes the farmhouse program system is basically what he always applies to, saying that, I want to keep things in-house. I want to keep the recruiting in-house. I don't want to reach out into the transfer portal and stuff like that. And my opinion, you look at teams like Alabama with Jamison Williams, Henry Ato'oto, these guys that come in that fill position needs, right? That, in my opinion, is how you win national championships. That's how you go to the playoffs. And, what better example than, up at Michigan State with Mel, right? Proving that right away, how you can turn around a program by bringing in a Kenneth Walker or somebody like that. And Brent Venables doing the same thing here, bringing over Dylan Gabriel and LV and, a bunch of other ones I could talk about.
So
but
does the acquisition that Oklahoma made in the transfer portal, is that reflective in the Rivals rankings or no?
No, so they're going to have transfer portal rankings, which Oklahoma, I believe, is sitting at 6th right now, while USC is obviously sitting at number 1. But I don't look too much into the transfer portal rankings because, it's like Alabama. Alabama doesn't have a need of bringing in 15 transfer portal guys because we don't have that many position needs. We only had 5, right? So when you look at both wide receiver positions could have been replaced. Running back, bringing over Jamar Gibbs. We needed a tackle really bad. Brought over Tyler Steen, and then obviously Jermaine Burton, obviously coming from Georgia as well. But you look at teams like USC that had Clay Helton and completely fell apart and needs to replace most of the roster. Well, yeah, USC is going to have the number one recruiting class. Now, did they do a great job bringing in Caleb Williams? Come on now. We knew that was going to happen. Mario Williams, both those guys from Oklahoma. Then you bring over a host of other guys, Covington from Washington, the cornerback, and people like that. That's why I don't get too caught up in the transfer portal rankings. And that's where people get lost is like, oh my God, USC is the number one transfer portal ranking class. Yeah, because they needed 15 positions. You know what I mean? The players couldn't fill the positions needed. Otherwise, there'd be another 4 and 8 team.
That's right.
4
and 8 being key.
Yeah, exactly. And Brent Venables does not have that problem. You know what I mean? Lincoln Riley did leave enough players behind that didn't transfer with him to fill a pretty good roster. So, yeah.
Bob Stoops built that program pretty well. I mean, he didn't win a lot of national championships, but he did win many, 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 many conference championships, which most teams would be satisfied with. But, with Oklahoma fans, they're just like Alabama fans. They want national championships.
Exactly.
So I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm going to let you get off of here. Yeah. In the immediate future, this first year of Brent Venables, how do you see him doing this first year? I mean, if you could give me a round part figure of his record, what do you see happening here?
So I'll give you a ballpark figure here. I think the cap is going to be a 10-win season with a low of like 8. And the reason I say this is because Oklahoma doesn't have the easiest schedule. They don't have the hardest, in my opinion, but they don't have the easiest. When you look at, there's a guy in Baylor. There's a pretty good coach. I don't think I need to say the name of the guy. He coaches defense pretty damn good. That game is going to be a game to circle. Oklahoma State, that's always going to be a game to circle, in my opinion, depending how Spencer, I forgot his last name, the quarterback's going to, can he prevent from throwing 5 interceptions a game, it feels like. And then you look at there's like a gauntlet that Oklahoma tends to go through every year where they always end up losing one game they shouldn't. And this gauntlet usually consists of Kansas State, TCU, and then it rolls into the Texas game, right? The showdown at 11 a.m. Apparently the Alabama Texas is doing as well this year. And Oklahoma tends to slip up in one of those games, right? So when you look at that, I feel like 10 wins is a good cap. A more realistic approach is probably 9. I see them slipping up in one of those games. I see them possibly losing to Texas, possibly, you know what I mean? So because it seems like no matter who the coaches are or what the record is when it comes down to Texas, look at last year. It's damn near an overtime game, it feels like, every year, or it's right there at it. Right. So I know Oklahoma fans want to hear that Brent Venables is going to blow out Texas. The expectations, the reality of it is it's probably not going to happen, considered you rarely did it before. But I do believe it's going to be a good year for Oklahoma. I do believe that the chances of them winning the Big 12 are there. It's very possible, depending on how Baylor recoups from losing all the NFL talent they did, depending on how Oklahoma State recoups, because they lost some guys too as well. But their quarterback is having a tendency of turning the ball over all the time. And then K-State, once again, they're still there. They have new players. They have Adrian Martinez transferred there. So there's definitely a lot of threat in the Big 12. When you look at the schedule, but I believe like 4 to 5 games can be circled on that schedule and go, well, those are losable games, but they are winnable games as well. So if the talent plays up to what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah, they almost lost to Nebraska last year.
Yes. Nebraska was a good team,
on the schedule too. People tend to forget about Nebraska being there. I know this has probably been said ad nauseum, but Nebraska was probably the best 3-9 team ever.
Yes. It's easy to look at Nebraska's record and go, they suck, but you clearly wasn't watching football if you think that Nebraska sucked. And Scott Frost has his back against the wall this year, and his seat is on fire 100%. So what better to cool that seat down than to beat, one of the biggest, I'd say, trains in Big 12 as far as momentum goes with Brent Venables.
Yeah, right? Plus Nebraska and Oklahoma used to have a real heated rivalry back in the day.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of history with each other. So a big win over Oklahoma will go a long way in helping Scott Frost keep his job next year.
Yeah. And they turned it into an 11 a.m. game, which is why Oklahoma's leaving the Big 12, right?
What is with 11 a.m. games, man? That's a bunch of crap. I hate them games. But I think that's all I got today. You got anything else you want to add?
No, man, that's pretty much it. This is going to be changing throughout the year. We need to do one of these videos at least probably like once every 2 months to give updates. But yeah,
Okay.
it's going to be chaos in the transfer portal and the recruiting. There's a lot more to come, that's for sure.
Well, go ahead and tell them how they can find you again.
All right. So as far as YouTube, college football with Johnathan Lewis, on Twitter at college FB Lewis. Pretty simple. If you like watching college football, make sure to check it out.
All right, brother. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel as well. And that's all I got to say about that. And as always, KMCA to all the other teams.